There's so many jigs on the market. I think a lot of people get a little bit confused what jig to use when. I mean, even at striking, look at all the different jig type baits we have in our lineup. And I'm just going to run you through our baits kind of quick and explain when I use them and why I use them. And of course, my favorite is the Premier Pro model. We've had that on the market for a lot of years. And here's the jig out of the package. It's got a big rattle on it, and that rattle really is the secret to what makes this jig such a good bait. And it's available in several different weights. My favorites obviously being 3/8 and 1/2 ounce, because I fish this bait in the heavy cover. It'll get in there and get out, and without a doubt, when you see me flipping jigs on TV, that is the jig I'm flipping, the Premier Pro model. And you can use it casting too. It's a good casting jig. It's got a strong enough hook for flipping, but yet it is light enough to where you can get hook penetration when you're fishing deep water. But probably the jig I fish more than that when it comes to casting in deep water is the regular old Pro model jig. That's the first jig I designed for Strike King 100 years ago, and it's still good nowadays just like it was then. Doesn't have as big a hook, so I don't recommend it totally for flipping real heavy cover with heavy line, but it's a great jig for casting, and in a pinch you can flip with it. I flipped with it for years, but now that we're using braided lines and fluorocarbon where you don't have as much stretch, you probably want to go with the Premier Pro model because it does have a stronger hook. Now, for the guys that really like to gear up and when you're on them great big bass fisheries, Lake Falcon, some of the Florida lakes, or when you're punching down through matted vegetation and you're fishing strictly braided line, 60, 80 pound test, Greg Hackney designed a jig for Strike King, and I mean, it's got a man-size hook in it, great big old hook, and it's not going to flex at all. The head design is designed to go down through the grass easy, and when it comes back out of the grass where you're going to make your next drop, it doesn't have a lot of grass cling to it. Greg did a great job with this jig. It's become very, very popular for fishing mats or fishing braided line in a real heavy cover. It'll definitely get those giant fish out of there. And then when we get out on structure, this is a bait that has really played a big part in my fishing the last few years. We started out earlier in our careers, Carolina rigging and doing things like that in order to fish some of them deep water humps and ledges. Now I don't do a whole lot of that anymore because we got the football jig, and that's like my underwater eyes. I can feel them rough spots. I can fish it fairly fast, still cover water fast in that same zone. And it's the tour grade football jig. This is the jig that actually helped me win an event this year. I was throwing it in a 3/4 ounce size, and I was throwing it in a color what we call 46. It's actually a green pumpkin type jig, and using one of the green pumpkin chunks behind it. Football jigs have become very, very popular. They've become so popular that we actually have designed a heavy hook football jig. It's got a beefier hook in it, and once again, this is for when you're fishing for them great big fish, or you got a lot of heavy cover where you got to put a lot of force on them. When I switch to this jig, I go to 20-pound fluorocarbon. When I'm fishing the other regular football jig, I'm using 15-pound fluorocarbon. All right, moving on. You get in a finesse situation and you're flipping into heavy cover or skipping underneath boat docks, we designed this bitsy flip specifically for that. It's got a small profile hook, but a very strong hook. Put a little crawfish on behind that as your trailer, and it's a great flipping bait when the fishing's real, real tough. Now, going to light line, we got the regular bitsy bug jig. This is a jig that you can actually fish with 8-pound test. I filmed a old bass class show several years ago, and the only way we could get the fish to bite was 8-pound test line and throwing the bitsy bug with a little chunk on behind it. Cold water, clear water. That's a good finesse type style bait. Finesse jigs have got popular because so many people are fishing high pressured lakes, a lot of angling pressure on them. And in clear water scenarios, you need to downsize or go to lighter line. We actually came out with a finesse jig. We got it available in some really cool colors that match any water situation you're going to get into. But I recommend the natural colors when you do get into that clear water because they will get you more bites. We also have tournaments once in a while where we get into where we got the water willow, the shallow grass, milfoil, places where the bass get in a mood where they really don't want a bait vertically dropping down on top of them. They want something horizontal coming through the water column, and the only way you're going to catch those fish and get the bait in and out is with a swimming type motion of a jig. So we come out with a swim jig. We also have a Hackney version of this that's actually got a stronger hook in it for when you really need to gear up. But swim jigs have become very, very popular, and if you got the type of cover where you really can't get a spinner bait through or get a square bill crankbait through, you might try swimming a jig through those, and the swim jig is the way to go. The other thing we've come out with that's been very popular the last few years are the shaky head jigs. And we got the football jigs for those of you that like to use a grub or skirt them yourself. But the shaky head's been very, very popular. So we've got heads for those that you can rig up with your worms, whatever. And the bladed jigs have also become very popular. And talk about a bait that's helped me out a bunch in a pinch is the Pure Poison. This is a dynamite big fish bait, puts a tremendous amount of vibration out in the water, and you can rig it several different ways. You can leave it the way it is, or you can put the new Rage grub on behind it, or you can put the 4.5-inch Shadowlicious behind it. You got a dynamite big fish bait here. You need to get you some Pure Poisons. But the bottom line is, if you want to be totally prepared for all fishing scenarios, you need to get a lot of different jigs to match the situation, and that way you're going to not only get more bites, but you're going to hook and land a higher percentage of fish. And you don't need to look anywhere else than Strike King.